First thing I'm going to say is that this is really hard to do. This is like my fifth attempt to get this out. I'm kind of tired of doing it, so I think I'm just gonna like completely go for it, let it rip, and whatever happens happens. So, um, chapter two, I felt well, what is the salient point that I can take away from the chapter? Thinking globally, what stood out to me was all the examples of individual advocacy across the related fields to push the field forward in ethics and more humane treatment of those in need of treatment. And how far we've come because of that, but also how relatively young this field is. Can kind of made me think, where are we still sort of in the dark ages with regard to how we're operating. Um, the article, I'm assuming that was in reference to the ProPublica article about insurance and people leaving the network. Yeah, it just was really disheartening. And this is something I've discussed with my therapist before, who does not take insurance. And I just asked him why one day, and he pretty much explained what many therapists talked about, sharing in their experience with not getting paid on time, getting squeezed on what is a market rate for their services, insurance companies wanting to, run the show from a clinical perspective, which is sort of horrifying. So yeah, it was quite disheartening. That's all I took from that. The the secret hidden questions. I think one of them was, what's the difference between empathy and compassion? So I'm going to actually read something I wrote because I don't want to just go off cuff. I wrote that empathy is an accurate interpretation of another's thoughts and emotions and the ability to, as much as one can, become immersed in that specific psychological and emotional experience. It's a bit wordy. It's just the ability to feel what someone else is feeling, which I think a lot of times we think we can feel that, but who's to say? What this made me think of was the first time I ever told somebody in my life that I was struggling with addiction was it was such a defeating moment. I felt so defeated and alone. It made me feel more alone because I went to someone who I was buddies with, and we had partied together and stuff. He was a lot more put together than I was at the time, and I got kind of laid it out for him, the extent of what was going on with me, and he was compassionate and he was sympathetic, but he was not and could not be, I don't think, empathetic. There was a disconnect. He really couldn't inhabit where I was coming from, and some of his advice and how he tried to console me just really didn't do it. And it wasn't until I talked to someone who also had that issue, who also had substance use disorder, that I felt like I wasn't alone, and I felt somewhat comforted because I was talking to somebody who was having success in managing that. So that's what I think about. And so I don't know if it's always possible to be empathetic. I may not. Maybe the best I can do is compassion, which for compassion I wrote the capacity one has for recognizing suffering in others and feeling sympathetic concern and then acting on that concern in whatever way I guess you can act. So yeah, I mean, like, I guess people who don't have a large capacity for compassion just might not give a fuck, pardon my French, but like, they see suffering, they don't really care, they keep it moving. I think people with a lot of compassion notice these things, are sensitive to them, They feel them deeply, and they may or may not then act on in whatever way they can to alleviate that suffering. So that's what I had for that part, and then my it factor. Um, Having the benefit of like running groups and doing one-on-one kind of amount to coaching sessions with clients. um, I've kind of been able to develop a style to develop, I don't know, I guess style is the best word for it. um, but genuineness is what comes to mind. Just being really authentic. I mean, there's a line where I don't want to come in and start like complaining about my day. That's pretty genuine. I'm like bitching about my problems, but like that's not gonna invoke a lot of confidence. It's not professional. It's not gonna invoke a lot of confidence in whoever I'm counseling. Um, Genuineness within certain bounds, like not putting on an affectation as a counselor, which was really hard in the beginning. I think that just comes with practice, and for me, it it just helps that process to have like a real conversation with somebody. I'm also not afraid to go off script, to let things, not follow a specific track. I'm not working from a checklist. I don't like to do that. I like spontaneity, and try to make room for that. I also like to make inappropriate jokes, like within like reason, but like kind of catch people off guard with humor. I guess disarm people with humor. Um, you know, Maybe inappropriate's not the right word, because I'm usually appropriate. Try to be appropriate. I hope I'm appropriate, at least with people I've met with on a client basis. So I think that's my it factors, kind of shooting from the hip. And maybe that might be seen as unprofessional. I don't know. This is going on really long now, so I'm gonna wrap it up. I think I covered everything. Thanks for listening. If you got this far, and if not, no worries. Bye.